Hey guys, welcome back. So now it's been a minute since we've done one of these movie talks, but I had to bring it back for Doctor Strange 2. And by the way, just so you guys know, this one's spoiler free, so if you haven't seen it yet, you're safe here, not getting into the details. But the reason why I had to do this one for Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness is because with watching this film, it feels like the Doctor Strange film that I've wanted to see for a long time, or at least a version of one of them, but I just haven't gotten until now. And I don't say that to discredit the previous film, which was great for an origin story or any of the other portrayals by Benedict Cumberbatch in the other films, because all of that was cool. But as you guys know, or at least some of you who have been rocking with me for a minute, I've stated a number of times that I wanted more horror in a Doctor Strange film, which is something that I'd also mentioned a while back with my initial impression of Elizabeth Olsen portraying Wanda Maximoff in Age of Ultron, where we got a bit of that horror element, and I was like, oh, that's how she was introduced, we're gonna get more of that, that's amazing. But that wasn't so much the case. But now, with us getting this film directed by Sam Raimi, with the score being done by Danny Elfman, and now it's like I've gotten both those things, of which for a while I wasn't sure if I was gonna get. And so now with us getting this Doctor Strange film with more horror, as well as a taste of the darker Wanda, which I've always wanted, it's kind of brought me to the point to where now I don't want Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman to ever not do a Doctor Strange film. Because for me, my introduction to Sam Raimi, it wasn't necessarily the first Evil Dead film, or the second one for that matter, but it was Army of Darkness. And when I saw that as a kid, it left a lasting impression. And as I got older, looking back and then later watching the other films, I'd come to realize that Sam Raimi's combination of horror and comedy that would have you terrified and laughing hysterically in the same sitting, that this was more or less the equivalent to a chef who would prepare a dinner or a dessert that was the perfect combination of something sweet and salty. And for Danny Elfman, my introduction to him was during the Tim Burton Batman films, and ever since then, Danny Elfman, to me, his music has always been magic. Oh, and I don't want to skip over other scores from Danny Elfman like Beetlejuice or Edward Scissorhands. Like, everything this guy's done is just amazing, because he's always known how to make things that were either chilling or suspenseful, and either dark or mysterious, transform into something that is, again, just magical. But with saying that, it's the combination of Sam Raimi and Danny Elfman that I believe really made an impact on the storytelling of Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness. Because for this film, and again, without getting into spoilers, but for this film, with it being the Doctor Strange sequel, it needed to turn up the notch on the dark and weird. And I'm glad to say that it very much did. But also with it turning these things up, it was still done within reason to where it could still get that PG-13 rating. But with moving forward, because I think you guys get the idea that I was excited about the darkness. But with moving forward, this film was handled well at its scale, because it's not the biggest film that's been done by Marvel Studios as far as the scale, but by all means it is definitely one of the best. So with that said, don't be that guy that walks into every Marvel film expecting it to be on the scale of Avengers Infinity War or Avengers Endgame, because if you do that, you're only doing yourself a disservice. But instead, if you go into this movie with the expectation of seeing Doctor Strange 2, then I assure you that you are in for a treat. Because as far as the characters, when we get America Chavez, to where in her case, I'm not the biggest America Chavez fan, but even in her case, I was surprised on how comic accurate the treatment for America Chavez was, as well as the explanation of her powers and the telling of her backstory. And for Wanda Maximoff, to where in her case, it was very much a continuation from where we had seen her last in WandaVision, which just flowed right into this film, allowing the story of this film to not have to pull away from Doctor Strange by spending 15 or 20 minutes or however long on trying to make the journey of her character make sense throughout the scope of this film. And for Doctor Strange, it continues his story as well, coming off the heels of Spider-Man No Way Home, but also with it including pieces of the story between him and Christine Palmer. It helped not only to dig into the current state of Doctor Strange, but also push his story forward. And aside from this, I want to talk about the Illuminati for a second, because we knew the Illuminati was going to be in this film, and when the movie gets to that point to where you know you're about to see them, you can just feel the energy in the theater bubbling up until that eruption. But in that moment when we find out who is on the Illuminati, and we get that reveal for one after the other, for the most part it's kind of like, okay, I figured, I knew, with a couple of oh they actually did that moments. But for me, there were 3 members of the Illuminati, to where for one, which is the only one that I'll name because it was in the trailer, being Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and that had me like, okay, this is really happening, this is actually happening. Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier in the MCU. Which again is not breaking news, it's in the trailer, but when you see it in the movie, as well as some of the story surrounding this Charles in this movie, in addition to other things that I won't talk about now, because I don't want to get into spoiler territory just yet. But aside from this, there's also another character who they had brought on as a member that not only did I find as a surprise, but I was also just wowed that they got the actor back. And not just that, but in this film, this mystery character who we have seen in live action before, but in this film with his costume and his presentation, he looks better than he ever has in live action. But then when I saw the third, sitting all the way to the far left, at that point I just couldn't believe that life was real. And not only because of the character, but who they casted to play the character, which from there just had my mind spinning thinking about all the heroes and villains connected to that character and where all of this could potentially go. But I don't know necessarily how to get into that without saying any spoilers, because there are a few other characters who I'm also excited about who are either only mentioned and some of which who were shown in the film, and we could talk more about that in a more spoilery video. But as for one of those characters who was shown in the trailer and actually had more screen time than what I expected, that one character out of those few would have to be Rintrah, who again, for you guys that's been rocking with me for a minute, you probably remember how I did a video a while back talking about how I wanted Rintrah in the MCU. And I think this video had went up like exactly 2 years ago, or just about 2 years ago. But with this film now not only giving us Rintrah, but also a ton of Easter eggs to much of Rintrah's history that we talked about in that video, and it just had me thinking with these cameos coming one after the other, that this film was truly a fan service. But with that said, I just wanted to take a moment and talk about my impressions of Doctor Strange 2 in the Multiverse of Madness, because there's not really a whole lot you can talk about without getting into spoilers about this film. So we'll save those talks for another time. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so we can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.